So what we are gonna try this morning or this afternoon is a kind of a tennis match between myself and Ylva. So we're gonna present each one of us a few slides, and we hope that's gonna be a dynamic format like this. So thanks for the introduction. Thanks everyone for being here. I want to just first acknowledge and thank the International Permafrost Association who provided the first funding of this crazy idea that started 5 years ago as just a casual way to illustrate permafrost science. So we're going to do a kind of a two-section presentation today. It's going to be like, first, what is permafrost, or this hidden ice? And the second part will be about the cartoons projects, really. So first, if you can switch the slide, dear colleague. Yeah, so if I ask you, what do you see here on this picture? It's in the middle of Siberia, or the Yakutian territory, or the Sakha Republic. What do you see there? You probably see, I don't know, lakes, a river, lots of forests, trees. You don't see any mountains, you don't see the sea, you don't see ocean, but you probably don't see that there is almost 1 kilometer deep or thick of frozen ground just beneath your feet there. And it's this region, you have the most ice-rich, the oldest, and probably the coldest frozen ground on Earth there. So you have probably between 600 and 700 meters thick of frozen ground there with lots of ice. So it's part of the cryospheric system. It's part of the ice world, but it's hidden. We don't see it. It's underneath our feet, and it covers like more than 20 million square kilometers in the northern atmosphere. So it's pretty huge. Up to you, colleague.
Okay. Yes, I switched. Okay. Here is one of few photogenic pictures, chances to see permafrost as it might look under your feet. This pudding-like feature in the middle is ice, but also around it we have permafrost, frozen ground. We define permafrost as any ground material, is rock or soil, that remains below 0 degrees for at least 2 years. So, am I moving? Yes, I'm moving. We have at the top, above the permafrost, we have something called the active layer. That thaws every summer when it's warm, and it refreezes in the winter. Below that is the permafrost, and it can be very, very thick. Here we see the frozen ground. Everything below the active layer, down to a certain depth. Of course, we know that inside the Earth, it's kind of warm. We have some soil, some ground here, and we have ice. We can have a lot of ice, we can have less ice. In this photo, we have a lot of ice. It's an massive ice wedge. But on the right side, you see some samples of ice in permafrost core, so samples of permafrost with ice that looks a little bit different. So we have ice. It might not look like the fancy glacial ice, but there's a lot of it, and it can be quite big, and it's under your feet if you're up in the permafrost regions. Okay, see if I can switch my slide again.
My turn. Yes. So where do you find it? Where do you find this frozen ground? You can see the map here. Of course, Canada and Russia are the two big permafrost countries. I'm sorry, but I don't think there is any permafrost in Australia, although maybe in the mountains in New Zealand, there might be some alpine permafrost, and of course in a section of the Antarctic Peninsula. So the more you get to the north, the more you get into those dark purple colors there. So the thicker it is, the colder it is, the more widespread it is. And if you push the button, Ylva, we will see the yellow stars there that show where we. We're going to see some pictures and videos that come from basically those three popular permafrost sites that are eastern Siberia near the city of Yakutsk, central Alaska near Fairbanks, and northern Canada, or the Inuit territory of Nunavut near the Bylot Island. Next slide, please. So why is it important to study this hidden frozen ground, this ground ice? Because first, it is important at the local level. So it's important because it's the main, it's the base of the northern infrastructures, railroads, roads, basements, houses and buildings. So you see here examples of infrastructure that can be affected by permafrost thawing, the melting of ground ice. And so it can be a little bumpy there on the road, for example. And so it is important as a, I would say, an applied science perspective to know the ground conditions and to design techniques or strategies to build better or to maintain those infrastructures. Up to you, Ylva.
Yes, we have another big issue that a lot of permafrost research is focusing on, and that is the carbon cycle in the context then of climate change. So in the soils in the permafrost region, we have about twice as much organic carbon as we do in the atmosphere. So we have a lot of carbon inside the soils in this region. And this is mainly due to that organic matter, so old plants and so, when they die, they don't decompose very quickly. So we have a lot of accumulation of organic material. And of course, if we think about the warming, which we expect to be, and it is already faster in the Arctic than it is in other places on Earth, we're warming this material with thawing permafrost, so perhaps we could start activating this carbon and maybe releasing it back to the atmosphere. So that is another big issue that where a lot of people are trying to estimate what is the impact of thawing of permafrost on the global carbon cycle. You see again on the left here, you see very organic, rich soil with big ice wedges, and you see on the right some bubbles with some gases perhaps in, and we will get back to bubbles. I think I'll just leave that there for now. Frédéric is a bubble expert, so we will, with this, stop the lecturing and look at some cool videos about permafrost. And over to you, dear colleague.
Yeah. So the first video here is a drone footage. It's like a drone footage from Yakutia near Yakutsk. So again, you see this super flat landscape of taiga, boreal forests everywhere for thousands of kilometers. And you see those little lakes there. You see the village where we where we study our sites there. And the key thing here is that the vegetation is kind of the protective layer during summertime, because it can get like 30-35 degrees Celsius during summertime in July, although it's like -60 during winter time. It's super cold during the winter time, but it can be pretty warm and hot during the summer. So if you have this layer of vegetation, it makes a kind of an insulating layer who protects the soil from thawing. And if you remove the vegetation, for example, if you construct a road, or in this example here, an agricultural field, then you allow the summer warmth to penetrate into the soil, so the ground ice melts, and you see this little lake that was formed like 30 to 40 years ago, because they cut the trees and then the ground ice started to melt. So you create new lakes, new aquatic landscapes because of climate change, but also because of human activity that can trigger this thawing. Next video. So so that's the same. Yeah, so what you see here is pretty spectacular. That's an example of what can happen when thawing of the soil becomes super fast. And so here you have those ice wedges, this ground ice that is exposed along a water pipeline that we can see on the background here. And just to give you an idea of the scale, it's 13 to 14 meters high, this kind of cliff there. And it developed in a few weeks during the summer 2019, super fast. Because why? Because we see that on at the end here, you see a valve, kind of a valve along the water pipeline, and there was a leak, a water leak during the summer, and just the water slowly dripping on the soil kind of brought some warmth and some energy and some heat into the ground, and it started to melt the ice. So now we have like what we call a thermal erosion gully, like a ravine there, which kind of brings a lot of meltwater and sediments somewhere else, as you will see on the next video.
Yes, and here is the next video. We see the same thermal erosion gully here, but now from higher above, and we can see all the sediments that have been mobilized over these few weeks and brought into the lake there. And then after a while, with trees falling and all the processes that goes on when this is formed, you might get a protective layer, so this rapid thawing stops. These processes, when we try to model, for example, the carbon cycle and everything, impacts of permafrost thaw in the Arctic, these processes are extremely difficult to incorporate in any model. We don't really know yet how to deal with them and how to estimate. It's much easier to think about what happens with the gradual thaw that happens everywhere in the Arctic. Then all of a sudden there is a pipeline dripping in Yakutsk. So that's one of the challenges of scale that we can work with in our field. Now we're somewhere else. We are in a peaty environment. Peat, organic materials, lots of organic materials that are thawing here and falling into the water. And we see how all this organic material, which we have a lot of this peat in many places in the Arctic, can fall into the water, and there it thaws more and it starts to decompose and it becomes available for what, Frédéric?
Microbes. Yeah, so here you see we're gonna go underneath the ice cover in a lake in Alaska during winter time, and you can see all those bubbles that are frozen into the ice cover there. So usually methane bubbles that were produced during summertime, during the fall, during the winter, and they get stuck in the ice layer. And when you arrive at the bottom, you can see those big pancake style bubbles that were merged together, that were produced at the end of the winter time. And again, you see, I don't know if you saw that brownish, yellowish color of the water. Again, it's dissolved and particulate organic matter that come from thawing soils and that serve as food for microbes, bacteria that will produce the carbon dioxide and the methane that are those greenhouse gases. Pretty cool footage there. And what you're going to see here, what happens when you try to ignite this, of course, if it's almost pure methane, that's gonna burn. So it's basically ice that burns because you have those big methane bubbles that were trapped in ice. To you, colleague.
Yeah, but we have to see the burning methane. I switched too quickly also, so we need to look at it again. It's
pretty cool stuff.
Very dramatic. Okay. That's enough for the videos. Actually, we'll now switch to our cartoon project. About time, yes. So the frozen ground cartoons. I guess Fred started thinking around 2015 about this, because I think at the end of 2015 I got an email, and I was not the only one. Fred emailed a bunch of colleagues, early career permafrost researchers in I don't know how many countries in Europe and some in Canada. We were, I think, in total 11 people that came together and around the idea of somehow visualizing permafrost, which is surprisingly difficult, challenging. I mean, after this presentation, perhaps you think it's always photogenics, but I think these are a basic collection of permafrost in its most visual states that you can find it, that you've seen. So the idea was to work together with artists and create something that visualizes permafrost for the public, and focusing on schools and teachers mainly. And we had a call out for artists, and we're all scientists. We didn't know how many we would reach, but we got a lot of applications for this call, and we had 10 artists that we really loved, and we think we wanted to work with all of them, and they made one-page pitches about permafrost in very different styles. And in the end, we had to choose 2 to continue working with, and we landed on working with Noemi Ross from Canada and Heta Ness from Finland. And they have, you'll see the styles that they work in, very different styles, and very nice artwork, I think. And over to you, Fred.
Yeah, thanks. So the next couple of slides we're going to see here, it's again, we were inspired by our own, let's say, from the scientist perspective, we wanted to convey some science stuff, or an impression of what it is to conduct permafrost research on the field. So of course we were inspired by those visuals, those pictures, and so you see here compared between each other what's the real situation with the picture and how it was conveyed or illustrated in the cartoons. For example, the buildings on the right, or lake studies on the bottom left here. And next slide, please. You're going to see also some illustrations of what it is to work on the field. For example, permafrost coring on the left, and you see also some thawing processes on the right for what we call thaw slumps. So again, it was kind of an iterative process between the science team and the artist. For us, scientists try to think more like an artist, and reciprocally for the artists trying to get another method, really 2 different worlds coming together. That was mainly the experience, and that's what we tried to illustrate here. Over to you.
Thank you. Yes, we also include some parts of just life in the field, how beautiful it is in the Arctic, and kind of these situations which perhaps also goes back to the first presentations we had about the small international community of explorers that go up and sit for a few a few weeks in a small quarters and have quite a good time if we're lucky, and hopefully, usually that's the case. So we also have some illustrations of such things, and in general, I would say I was quite impressed with the artist because we were 11 scientists and 2 artists, and we had a lot of thoughts and opinions, and we just threw everything at them. Can you get this? Can you do this? Can you get this? And somehow they managed to survive this process and also really make fantastic illustrations of most of the things that we really wanted in there. So far, we have these cartoons printed. It's a 20-page thing. It's 10 pages from one artist and 10 from the other, and then there are the 2 pitches, and then there's some other material about, there's a dictionary or some permafrost glossary in there, and a little bit of other material. We have it online. We have some printed copies in some languages, but we have them in English, Swedish, French, German, Russian, Inuktitut, Greenlandish, and Danish, I think, are the ones we have so far. The process has been basically that we just check, is there anyone in the group who knows any language we can translate to? Do we know anyone who knows any language? And then people just volunteer to translate, and then we have also some people that we know have started translations to Chinese, Sami, Hindu, and Yakutsk. We are not completely sure exactly where it stands right now. The big thing, the only thing that actually has a cost here right now is to actually typeset the thing. So maybe that's often where it kind of gets stopped if there's no funding for that, and then it takes a bit of a while to get to the actually finished version. But we're super happy to have all these different languages, and also that we now have also some actual Arctic languages in there with the Inuktitut and Greenlandish, and the Sami coming, hopefully. Yeah, over to you.
Yes, and one example of the byproducts that were not expected when we started all this was, for example, in 2019 we went to Luxembourg. Why not? Luxembourg is, of course, the mecca of permafrost. No, I'm just kidding. But we went to visit high schools there for a whole week, and I think it was 4 or 5 high schools, and we prepared permafrost workshops. So the idea was to introduce the high school students to permafrost science in a fun and, we hope, interesting and interactive way. So if you can push the button, Ylva, you have an example here. So for example, on the top right corner, we would design those aquariums with little villages, Arctic villages with ice and soil. And we would slowly thaw this frozen ground with a hair dryer, as you can see, who simulates climate change or global warming. So it's a kind of accelerated global warming. And so the students could note what was the subsidence or the ground settlement from the surface during 1 or 2 hours. What happens to the infrastructure on top? Like you probably can see, but there are little houses and infrastructure and cars and stuff. So they could see what's happening on the ground at the surface when the ground underneath thaws. And for example, we were also able to visit chemistry labs to ignite some methane. So again, the analogy, what happens on the field, as you saw in the videos in the ice cover, full of methane bubbles. And then we would go to the actual chemistry lab to ignite some methane to illustrate again spectacularly, but still what happens with in the Arctic, climate change, permafrost thawing, and so on. Next slide, please. And another byproduct of that was the AR augmented reality application that you can download at your favorite place. There's also a QR code on the website. And so when you have this on your tablet or your smartphone and you read the actual cartoons, you can, that's gonna recognize some content, and you could visualize 3D maps, videos, pictures, or sketches with your smartphone. And so that was another level of unexpected result from this project. And you have a way to get much more interactive content with the booklet. And then what you can see on the right part, we also designed, for now it's like at the prototype step, but we designed a board game inspired, something similar to Trivial Pursuits, if you know this thing. So questions that you have to answer. And again, you can generate augmented reality material while you play the game. Over to you, Ylva.
Okay, we have some things in the pipeline also. Yes, we might have an audiobook based on the life of a mosquito and how it interacts with permafrost researchers out in the field. We have started this project, and we're right now on a little bit of a break and run out of some funding, but we are hopeful to continue this eventually and get some audiobook or audio material, audio story, something sound-based with lots of sound of mosquitoes. You should feel like being surrounded by mosquitoes every directions, basically what we hope. Shouldn't be too hard, we hope. We need some funding for paying the mosquitoes, obviously. Then we have actually Diana Urs, who she actually applied, was one of the artists who applied to be in the original permafrost frozen ground cartoons. She had this idea of more interactive online material as well, and I think that was not really the direction we're going at that time. So we didn't end up working with her for that, but some other ways around, we got in touch again, actually through this audiobook project partly. And she is now working on a permafrost story independently from this original funding and everything. And she is working on a immersive VR experience on permafrost. She has already a series called Sunny Smog as a character, and which is, you can Google that online, you can find Sunny Smog explores different types of science, and it's interactive online material. But this, I think, is the first one which will be in VR, and will somehow be able to explore and experience all sides of permafrost, also with sounds. And the story both has, I think, as far as I understand, both me and Fred featured in this story. So we will be cartoons. It will be fantastic. Will be VR cartoons. Most importantly, there's a bunch of kids from California, because she's based in the Bay Area in California. A bunch of kids there who, with VR, travel to explore permafrost, and there in VR meet a bunch of kids from Yakutsk, the school that Fred has been working with. And then they meet us, and then they meet some VR designers as well, and magic happens somehow. So this is work in progress that we're also looking forward to see where it lands in the end. This is your slide, Fred.
Yeah, I just want to maybe just a quick note at the end. We were talking about progresses sometimes that are unexpected or slow. We all do that for the science part. We all do that as a voluntary basis. So of course, at the beginning, the first funding was to actually pay the artists. But again, when we have new ideas, it's totally free, it's cool. But again, when we want to achieve those ideas, for example, printing copies, each time we have to apply for funding. So just keep in mind that it doesn't, maybe it doesn't go as fast as we would want sometimes, but it slowly but steadily it progresses, and so it was quite some nice surprises to see all those tentacular byproducts that stemmed from this original project. So we're here. If you have any question, thanks very much for your attention.